It was a chilly winter morning in Chicago with the usual hustle and bustle of the city. Donald Trump was heading to an important meeting in his car, navigating through the busy streets of downtown. The cold wind swept through the city as pedestrians hurried by, each focused on their own destinations. But amid the usual chaos, something caught Trump's attention. At a street corner, sitting on the sidewalk, was a man wrapped in a worn-out military jacket and an old frayed blanket. Next to him was a cardboard sign with bold, simple letters. "I'm a veteran. Please help." Most people walked past without a second thought, too busy to even glance his way. But Trump couldn't ignore the sight. He instructed his driver to pull over immediately. With a sense of urgency, he stepped out of the car and his security team followed close behind. The cold air stung his face as he walked toward the man, who at first seemed startled, but remained seated, unsure of what to expect. As Trump approached, the homeless man, who was noticeably older and more worn than most, hesitated before looking up. "What's your name?" Trump asked in a soft yet genuine voice. The man took a moment to respond, his voice shaky and tired. "My name is James Anderson." Trump knelt down to meet him eye to eye, his presence calm yet intense. He could sense the weight of this man's story even before he spoke. "Tell me your story, James," Trump said, his tone empathetic. With a deep sigh, James began to speak, his hands trembling as they gripped the edges of his blanket. "I'm a veteran," he started. "I joined the Army when I was 21. I served overseas, fought in Afghanistan. But the hardest part wasn't the war, it was coming home." Trump listened intently as James continued. His voice grew more strained as he spoke of the horrors of war, losing comrades, and the struggles of reintegrating into civilian life. "When I came back," James continued, "I thought things would get better. But nothing did. I was injured, physically and mentally. My family couldn't handle it. They said I was a burden." The words hit Trump hard. James' face, etched with pain, seemed to reflect years of suffering. "I lost my job, my home," James went on. "I found myself on the streets, alone. I fought for this country, but now it feels like I'm invisible. People walk past me like I'm not even here." Trump stood there, absorbing every word. His expression hardened with empathy, but there was also a determination in his eyes. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. This man, who had given everything for his country, was left to suffer in silence on the streets of Chicago? James's voice broke as he recalled a particularly painful memory. "Last winter, a man I shared the streets with, a Vietnam veteran, froze to death beside me. I woke up to find him still in his blanket. I called the police, but it was too late. It's terrifying to think that one day, that might be me. Forgotten." There was a long pause. The weight of James' words hung in the air. Trump, feeling the gravity of the situation, took a deep breath. "James," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "a man like you should never be in this situation. You fought for this country. Now, this country owes you. I promise you, this will change." For the first time in what felt like forever, a spark of hope lit up in Jamie's eyes. "You really mean it?" he asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. Trump nodded without hesitation. "Yes, James. You fought for this country, and now it's time for this country to fight for you." The moment was a turning point not just for James but for both men. This wasn't just about offering help. It was about restoring dignity and offering a path forward. Trump had made a promise, and he intended to keep it. Trump stood in silence for a moment, absorbing the gravity of James's words. The icy wind blew around them, but neither man seemed to notice. The hustle of the city continued unabated, yet here, on this cold street corner, an unspoken bond had formed between them. James, his eyes still filled with uncertainty, looked at Trump with a mixture of disbelief and hope. Could this really be happening? "You really mean it?" James asked again, his voice trembling as he sought reassurance. Trump's gaze softened. Yes, James. You've given everything for this country, and it's time this country gives something back. You deserve better. Much better than this. There was a long pause as the words settled between them. Trump was determined. The promise he had made wasn't just words. It was a commitment to someone who had sacrificed so much and was now forgotten by the very system he had fought to protect. Trump understood the pain in James's eyes. He saw the hopelessness that had been building up for years, the isolation that had become his reality, and now he was going to help change that. Let's get you out of here, Trump said firmly, signaling to his security. The man who had once fought for his country was about to be given a chance to reclaim his dignity, his hope, and his life. Trump made a call, his voice calm yet decisive. Get him the best care, the best treatment, and book him into a nearby hotel. No questions asked. Make sure he's taken care of immediately. The security team swiftly got to work. Within minutes, they brought James a steaming hot meal, something he hadn't had in ages. As James took the first bite, his eyes welled up with tears. It's been so long since I've had something warm to eat, he said softly, almost in disbelief. Trump, sitting beside him, offered words of encouragement, making sure James felt supported, not just with food, but with kindness that had been long absent from his life. As the minutes passed, the car was ready. Trump helped James into the sleek black SUV, treating him with the care and respect he had been denied for so long. When they arrived at the hotel, James was led to a private room, where a hot shower, clean clothes, and a soft bed awaited him. For the first time in years, James felt a sense of dignity, a glimmer of what it felt like to be treated as a human being again. Trump's commitment to James didn't stop there. A doctor was on hand to examine him, ensuring that he received the medical attention he so desperately needed. Trump's foundation covered all the costs, making sure James didn't have to worry about anything. It wasn't just about a meal or a place to stay. It was about giving James a chance to rebuild, to start over, and to regain the sense of self-worth that had been stripped away from him by the harsh realities of life on the streets. Later that morning, Trump sat down with James over breakfast, a warm smile on his face. I've made some arrangements for you, Trump said, sliding a brochure across the table. There's an organization called Veterans United that helps veterans like you get back on their feet. They provide housing, job training, and counseling. I'm going to personally cover all your expenses for the first year. This is your chance, James, to start fresh. James looked at Trump, stunned. You're really doing this for me? His voice quavered with emotion. Trump nodded. Yes, you've served this country. Now, it's time for this country to serve you. The transformation had begun. James was no longer just another forgotten soul on the streets of Chicago. He was a man with a future, with a purpose, and with someone who cared. And this was just the beginning. The following morning, James woke up in the comfort of a warm, clean bed. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he was no longer lying on the cold, unforgiving streets of Chicago. The soft glow of sunlight filtered through the curtains, and the silence of the hotel room gave him a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. As he slowly opened his eyes, the events of the day before came rushing back. It wasn't a dream. Trump had kept his word. Trump arrived at the hotel early, just as James was finishing his breakfast. He greeted him with a smile and a firm handshake, as if they had known each other for years. "How are you feeling?" Trump asked, his tone genuine, concerned. James, still trying to process everything, smiled back, though it was a small, hesitant smile. "Better. I never thought something like this could happen to me. I don't know how to thank you." Trump sat down across from him, looking him in the eyes. "You don't need to thank me. I made a promise, and I keep my promises. Now, it's time for you to focus on getting better, on getting back on your feet." With that, Trump handed James an envelope, his eyes steady and filled with purpose. Inside this, there's information on a program called Veterans United. They specialize in helping veterans like you rebuild their lives. They offer housing, job training, and counseling to help you get back on your feet. I've already arranged for you to meet with them today. And I'm personally covering your expenses for the first year. Jameson's eyes widened in disbelief. You're really doing all this for me? Trump nodded, his voice unwavering. You serve this country. It's time for this country to give back. You've earned it. James felt a lump form in his throat. The weight of it all hit him. The kindness, the care, the hope that had been restored in him. He had gone from a man living on the streets to someone with a real chance at turning his life around. But there was still a part of him that couldn't fully believe it. Trump leaned forward, a slight smile crossing his face. This is just the beginning, James. You've got a lot of life ahead of you, and I believe in your ability to change things. Take this opportunity and make it count. As they walked out of the hotel, James was escorted to a sleek black SUV once again. Trump's security team had already arranged everything: the car ride, the meeting with Veterans United, and the follow-up support that James would need. The day was set in motion, but for the first time in a long time, James felt the weight of uncertainty lift off his shoulders. At Veterans United, James was introduced to a team of professionals who were ready to help him every step of the way. They explained the resources available to him: safe housing, vocational training, and access to mental health support. There was a plan now, a clear path forward, and James wasn't walking it alone. For the first time in years, he saw a future where he wasn't just surviving, but thriving. Later that afternoon, James stood in front of a small crowd at Veterans United, a check from Trump's foundation in his hand. His voice wavered as he spoke to the group, but there was a new determination in his words. I never thought I'd be here, he said, but because of one person, I've been given a chance. A real chance. I promise you, I'll make the most of it. As he looked around the room, James knew that his life had just taken a turn for the better. He wasn't just receiving help. He was being given the tools to help himself, to regain his dignity and his purpose. And as he moved forward, he vowed to never forget the kindness that had changed everything. The days that followed were nothing short of transformative for James. With the support of Veterans United and the foundation set in place by Trump, he started to rebuild not just his life, but his spirit. The fear and hopelessness that had once gripped him like a vice seemed to fade into the background, replaced by a growing sense of purpose. Each morning, James would wake up in a safe, clean environment, a stark contrast to the cold, unforgiving streets he had known for so long. The weight of the world no longer bore down on his shoulders. Instead, he had a future to look forward to, a future that he could shape with his own hands. Veterans United had set him up with a job training program, helping him learn new skills that would make him employable once again. The people there were kind, professional, and most importantly, they saw potential in him. James had spent years feeling invisible, like no one cared. But now, for the first time in a long while, people were invested in his success. Trump's foundation had paid for the first year of his expenses, taking away the pressure of worrying about housing or food. James could focus on his training, on finding stability, without the constant fear of where his next meal would come from or where he would sleep at night. It was a safety net, one that allowed him to rise up and take back the life that had been stolen from him. Every day brought new challenges, but with each step forward, James grew stronger. He attended therapy sessions to help with the mental and emotional scars left by years of trauma. The weight of his past was still there, but now he had the tools to manage it. The progress was slow, but it was real. For the first time, he felt like he was moving in the right direction. One afternoon, as he sat in a meeting with a potential employer, James couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude. He had come so far from the man who once sat alone on a cold sidewalk, begging for help. He had a chance now, an opportunity to make something of himself, to prove that he wasn't just a homeless veteran, but a man who could contribute, who could stand tall again. When James received his first paycheck from his new job, he couldn't believe it. The feeling of accomplishment, of having worked hard for something and earned it, was unlike anything he had ever experienced. It wasn't just money, it was validation. It was proof that he could overcome his past, that he could carve out a new future. Trump's impact on James's life didn't stop at the financial assistance or the connections made with Veterans United. What Trump had given him was hope, a belief that his life was worth saving. It was the catalyst for change, the spark that set James on a path to rebuild everything he had lost. As he looked at his first paycheck, James made a promise to himself. One day, he would be in a position to help someone else, to pay forward the kindness he had received. He had been given a lifeline, and he wouldn't waste it. James wasn't just surviving anymore. He was thriving. He was no longer a man defined by his past mistakes or the struggles he had faced. He was a man with a future, a man who had found his purpose again. And as he moved forward, he knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where he would make a difference in his own life and in the lives of others.